Welcome to The Change, a podcast about the changes in life that shake, break, and make us. I'm Laura, a 45-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum who has until recently always loved change.
And I'm Kathy, a 53-year-old writer, podcaster, and mum, and change is actually my kryptonite. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia on which this podcast is recorded and recognise the continuing connections to lands, waters and communities.
We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and elders past and present.
The Season 2 partner of The Change is Alivio Wellness Skincare, hydrating natural skincare for the over 40s.
Keep listening to the end of this episode for a discount code for your next order of Alivio Wellness products. Hey Kathy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. How about you?
I am good. Thank you very much for asking.
Yeah. So, tell me, who have we got coming today?
Today we have Ali Anderson, and Ali is the General Manager of the Illawarra Women's Health Centre, which provides integrated care and support to women with complex needs with a focus on supporting mental health, women experiencing domestic and family violence and sexual assault, and sexual and reproductive health. Ali herself is an experienced general project and change manager and has worked in holistic and therapeutic health services, education and training, STEM and emergency services. She's had an amazing career. She has a passion for advocacy, empowerment and support for all women and driving positive change at the systemic level. She's also a mother of 3 adult daughters. She's a co-parent of 6 fur babies, her respite foster carer, and loves nothing more than gardening, cooking, and reading in her downtime. Just as a note, we're going to be discussing some pretty heavy topics with Ali today. So we're going to include some support services in our show notes.
Please reach out if anything in today's show triggers something in you. Make sure you reach out to any of the support services that we have listed in our show notes. Hi, Ali. How are you going? So great.
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, great. So great to have you on, and we can't wait for our listeners to hear all about you. So just a really gentle question to start with. I can't fall asleep without an episode of like West Wing or Big Bang playing, and I happen to know that for you have an episode of The Golden Girls playing when you fall asleep. Why The Golden Girls?
That is correct. I actually only came across The Golden Girls 7 years ago, which was a time of pretty epic change in my life generally. And a number of things really stood out to me about the show. So I guess the first was that it really showcased ageing women as capable, as sexual, as assertive, career-focused women who happened to be in their 60s and one in her 80s, if you've watched the show, which was a huge shift away from women of that age seen as sexless, as invisible, elderly mothers and grandmothers. The other interesting thing is, for me in particular, how it addressed a lot of key issues for women that still exist today head on, how women are treated as less than in the medical system, the workplace, by partners, by their kids, coercive control, DV, so much. It's not entirely politically correct for anyone that's watched it. There's a lot of slut shaming, shall we say, competitiveness and nastiness played for laughs. But generally speaking, it's a hilarious, clever show in a simpler time, and the issues were always resolved at the end of the episodes with a nice key message about friendship and growth at the end of every episode. Just a lovely show, really.
Yeah. And you're right. Like, I mean, when we watch back so many of the shows that we grew up with and look at them with today's lens, they're like completely inappropriate. But at the time, they were, I mean, Golden Girls really was ahead of its time when you think about it. And it's interesting because, you know, we're all 3 of us are nearing that age that the women in the Golden Girls show were, and they are depicted as like older, grandmotherly type, like very grey. You know, Blanche was the only one that was sort of stylish, if you like, but she was still depicted as much, much older. And I kind of look at her and think, I don't look like that. And, you know, there still is really that invisibility around, you know, what older women are supposed to look like. And we spoke about that with Jacinth in the last season, around, what should an older woman look like? Or, I mean, we look what we look like. We are who we are.
Mm.
There shouldn't be a stereotype that we should be all grey with or grey rinsed hair and, those sorts of funny things. Yeah. So
I
it's
couldn't agree more. It's like, how do you get a bikini body or put a bikini on it, on your body? It's not dissimilar in terms of what does aging look like. You're you irrespective of your age, and I think the Golden Girls really talked about or showcased them as having relationships, having sex, talking about condoms. They weren't invisible and all of a sudden became prudes. It was just a beautiful sort of, it doesn't matter your age, you still have the same sort of needs and desires at any age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because what they were
Mm.
talking about and the subject matter of the show is still very relevant today, and they were, yeah, as you say, ahead of their time. But perhaps visually, we now are used to seeing women in that age group a little more. Like, there's a lot of work still to be done. There needs to be a lot more visibility of women over sort of 50 in the media. But you've got people like Kim Cattrall, or Victoria Beckham's just turned 50. You have these kind of
Mm.
sort of glamorous, youthful women looking sort of the same that they did in their 30s, and that's because of various means. But it's just, yeah, it just opens it up a bit more to other people understanding, yeah, you can age in many different ways, and the Golden Girls is one way. But I think in terms of the subject matter that they talk about, and it's really interesting, and we still need more of that. We still need to see more women over 50 on TV in shows where they're just talking about normal life, domestic.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just need more of it to open up that representation, I think. But Ali,
Yeah,
to
I couldn't
you,
agree more.
yeah, oh, good. It sounds like you are a big fan of the show. I actually have a confession that I've never watched it. Is that
Really? Oh, no,
yeah?
you
Oh my
need
goodness.
to. You really,
You
really
must.
need to.
Okay,
You
You
must.
must. Yeah.
all right,
We'll loop back in maybe in a month, and
okay.
I'll just send you a text and see if you've watched it, and we can.
Okay,
It's very, very
where can I
interesting.
watch it? Is it a Prime or Apple TV? Where is it
It's
showing currently?
it's just come back on Stan. I can't believe I know this.
Okay.
It's just come back on Stan, and it's on Disney.
Yeah. Oh,
And we're
Disney. All right.
thrilled because now we can
Yeah.
let go of Disney. We don't need it. We only had it for the Golden Girls.
Oh,
So,
right. Okay.
yeah, we're like,
Well, I
great,
don't
let go
have
of one
Stan, but I have
subscription.
Disney. So
Well, you're good to go.
I'm good to
Good
go.
to go. No
Okay.
Mhm.
excuses.
Okay. I'll check back in. Yep.
Well done. Well done.
Yep. But yes, onto yourself. You have reinvented yourself more than once in your life. What do you think your biggest change has been, good or bad, so far?
Oh, wow. I love that word reinvention.
Mm,
It's very interesting. I think we've all reinvented ourselves multiple times in our lives. Reinvention is experience, it's growth, it's change, it's learning. And we apply those things to our lives in many different ways. Probably my biggest reinvention was that seismic life change I referenced when I was talking about the Golden Girls. So, for most of my adulthood up to October 14, 2017, yes, I know the date, I was a high functioning alcoholic.
mm,
High functioning, I suppose, in the sense that I managed to finish a degree, I had
mm,
children, a family, I kept a job, I got up every morning, so I still functioned. I wasn't your classic perceived alcoholic in the gutter, drinking mouthwash, unable to hold down anything. I hid it reasonably well from the
mm,
outside world. Um, I was aware it was a big problem for most of that time, but because I didn't know how to address the root cause, I simply couldn't stop. My childhood, like many of us, was very difficult. I experienced a great deal of family violence from a very young age, physical, emotional, and mental. I therefore grew up, I suppose, with a poor sense of identity, deeply, deeply rooted insecurity, and
mm,
a great deal of fear and confusion about the world and my place in it. And so I did what many of us do. I continued that cycle of trauma in my own family. My daughters saw me more drunk nights than sober, probably. My life felt completely unmanageable, and I could not sustain relationships, financial stability, friendships, or my own mental health. Um, really, really tough, obviously.
Mm.
And
Hard.
as we still see day in and day out in our society, and I actually wrote an article about this for a local newspaper recently, my very deep-seated trauma and PTSD was pathologized and medicated by innumerable doctors and psychiatrists. So I was diagnosed with everything from borderline personality disorder, that old chestnut, depression, bipolar disorder, severe depressive episodes, but nothing ever actually fixed that. My game changer, or my reinvention, I suppose, came about in 2017 when I started schema therapy that actually addressed for the first time the deep rooted causes of my alcoholism. And I learned that the alcohol was never the problem, it was the band aid for the problem. And that's how I sort of was able to stop drinking. In 2018, I also commenced EMDR. It's a mode of trauma-based therapy called, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's a psychotherapy treatment. So it's not administering it, it's more about alleviating the distress associated with those traumatic memories. And I could go on and on about that for hours, but in these 7 years, my life has done seriously a complete 180. I've been able to repair and enjoy wonderful relationships with my children. I've gone from strength to strength in my career. I'm sustaining a healthy and functional marriage and have done for 6 years, and life is really, really good. So I'd say that's a fairly sizable reinvention.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a big
Just a
deal.
little one, really. I mean,
tiny.
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
stubbed
huge.
my toe getting out of bed. That was a reinvention because I had to change my shoes. It was
Oh.
terrible.
No, but that's a really, yeah, it's huge. We're having so many more discussions about sobriety, and obviously women, many women have stopped drinking alcohol and have had so many benefits. And obviously Kathy is a fellow sober girl. But I'm just really interested, I don't believe I drink too much, but I find this conversation so interesting when you say, you weren't a kind of in the gutter with the mouthwash. If you don't mind, like, can you share what life was like for you and what your relationship was like with alcohol on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I would get up in the morning. I'd always be mildly hungover. I was rarely, really, really nastily hungover because it was just a way of life for me. It wasn't a binge and drink 4 bottles of scotch or anything. It was probably 2 to 3 bottles of wine a day. Generally wouldn't start until I got home from work at 5 or 6 o'clock. When the kids were really little, it was get them to bed, make sure that's all done, have a couple of glasses of wine while I was cooking dinner or doing those things. So just a bit of a pleasant numbness.
Bit of a reward?
Well, I think it was a reward. It was a reward. And I think it also, and you'll know as well, Kath, from the ADHD diagnoses, is that the mind is always active, and it's just a blessed release. It's a relief from that constantly rapid cycling, ticking mind, never being able to still those thoughts, and it just kind of takes that away really, really quickly. So it's like a quick fix. And I think 2 things that really highlighted to me that I had a problem. So one was that, well, actually 3. One was that I thought about it all day. It was, when I get home and I'm going to do this, and alcohol was always involved. When could I get home? When could I start drinking? When could I safely do it? Second was I was drinking far more than I properly let on. So by that I was hiding empty bottles under the sink or in cupboards. If we had people over for dinner, I would have a glass of wine on the table and a glass of wine in the kitchen, which I had stashed. So while I was cooking, I was drinking that wine, going back to the table, and people would say, gee, you seem really drunk you've only had a little bit. And I'm like, oh yeah, my metabolism, I just get really drunk really easily, but I was sort of concealing that. And towards the end of my drinking, I suppose, in the last couple of years, I was starting to drink at lunchtime, and I was actually going out to my car and drinking at lunch because I just, was sort of losing my grip on being able to cope with it all. So it was a slippery slope. So I couldn't sustain friendships. I couldn't sustain relationships. I'd always promised to give up drinking. I never could. my heavy drinking would lead to arguments. I'd defend it. I'd lie about it. I'd, gaslight and attack the other person. You're making this up. I'm not that bad. There are worse people. I surrounded myself with people that would support me or advocate me or enable me. They just didn't want to shift. They didn't know how to shift it. And the last time I actually had a drink, I woke up the next morning and I couldn't remember how I'd gotten home. And I looked out the door and I saw my car sideways in the driveway, and I'd clearly driven it home. My partner at the time said, I can't be with you anymore like this. You're just out of control. And I remember thinking, this has got to stop. I can't live like this anymore. I can't continue. I just can't. I'm going to kill someone. I'm going to kill myself. I don't know how I never lost my license or had a crash or killed somebody, because I drove all the time. But that day I was just like, this has got to stop. This has got to end.
Oh, that would have been a big shock. And obviously you had many moments over time, but it sounds like that was the point of no return.
It was, and I don't know why that particular time, because it had happened before lots of times. I was like, yes, and I'd stop for a week or two, and so I don't know what it was, but it was it was very firm. I think it was because I'd started that schema therapy and sort of was able to separate myself from the drinking and recognize it as something that wasn't part of me, but something that I was doing. So it was that revelation, I suppose.
I was going to ask about schema therapy. What is it?
Schema therapy, well, it talks about these coping mechanisms that you develop in response to things around you as a child. So, and there are different types of behaviours associated with that, called schemas. So when something happens, you're going to act in a certain way because a certain part of your personality is activated. And so my drinking was what schema therapy calls detached self-soothing. So because of my underlying ADHD and trauma, the quickest way to self-soothe was to drink. And the only way I could live with myself as a drinker or an alcoholic was to detach. So I was like, there's Ali, and then there's this detached person over here who's doing this self-soothing, this drinking, this band-aiding, this medicating. And I could truly see it for something separate from me, which it was, and not part of me.
Wow.
Yeah, I think in a little
I can see you processing that, Kathy.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just sort of thinking, like that, a little bit like the dissociative amnesia that I have from, which is a very specific time frame in my life that still hasn't come back, and with all the different professionals, we've all stopped trying to force the memories back, for whatever reason. My brain is holding them safely away from my cognitive reality, which sounds very deep and everything, but it's a protective mechanism, for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
And so in some respects, we detach or we dissociate away from the behaviors, but I'm wondering if, like, sometimes we can't change. We're stuck in those moments, or those, stuck in our drinking or stuck in our habits, whatever they are, until we're ready to see that we need to make the change. Like, people around us can come at us all the time and say, don't spend that money, you don't need those things, you don't need to do that, or don't drink that extra drink or whatever. But until I'm ready to make that change in my own life and to really recognize that it's an issue for me, everyone can tell me that it's an issue for them, but until it's an issue for me, I'm not going to make that change. Like, in general, like that's a generalization for all people, that I'm using myself as the example there, but we can have those behaviors pointed out to us until the cows come home. But until they're actually an issue that we want to address, we just can't, like, that's almost like it's a roadblock to addressing that, because we don't see it as an issue. It's like, oh, that's okay. I'm coping, I'm functioning. It helps me band-aid whatever it is that I'm trying to band-aid, and I think in general as a society we want a quick fix. We want I've been thinking a lot around unhappiness versus depression, and sometimes when you've got little children and things like that, we're very quickly diagnosed with depression because you can be given a pill, but actually you might just be unhappy with the situation, not depressed, and you can't get a pill for unhappiness.
Mm.
Whereas you can get a pill for depression. So anyway,
Yeah. No, you raise a really good point. Well, you raise multiple good points, Kathy. I'm picking up on the one that you said around not wanting to change until you're ready to change, irrespective of what's going on around you. And one of the things in sobriety that has happened for me is that I've had a lot of people reaching out uh, to assist other people. So, oh, you've done so well. You've healed this. My XYZ has got this problem, and can you speak to them? And my answer is, if they approach me and they want help and they're committed to that change, I will absolutely help them
Mm,
without hesitation.
mhm,
If you're wanting to intervene in their behaviors and shift that narrative and that dialogue and that for them, it's not going to work. You
mhm,
can't want something more for a person than they want for themselves. And people find that very hard, when they want something so badly for a person and it's outside their sphere of uh, influence, of scope of change. You can't change other people. They need to want to change and embrace that themselves.
mm.
And I really picked that up on what you were saying, Kathy. It was very, very interesting.
Mhm. I
Mm.
guess I've had to do some reinvention myself over time. So
Mhm.
really different and similar reinventions. So, but yeah.
Mhm.
You describe yourself as a late bloomer. Can you tell us what you mean by what is a late bloomer and how that has really changed your life?
Um, I think I told you that I was a late bloomer, didn't I, Kathy? I think
Mm,
when you sort of talking about this podcast, it was, how would you describe yourself? Um, and I was thinking more about that yesterday, and I was sort of challenging that late bloomer label a little bit because I do that. I love to challenge things too much. It's exhausting. No wonder I used to
mm,
drink. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I think there are kind of two distinct answers on that. And so the first is, if I speak broadly, we talk about women being late bloomers in society. And what I actually think we mean is it takes a great deal of time and life experience for women to really become who and what we're meant to be. We identify ourselves very much through our family relationships and our roles throughout our lives, first as daughters, granddaughters, sisters, then as partners, lovers, wives. And then for many of us, along come children, which many would argue is the biggest role, I suppose you would say, that we ever play in our lives. For those of us who don't have children, that may be my choice. It may be by circumstance, and it can often be a very painful journey for some people,
mm,
particularly when society expects us to breed and fulfill that role. And it's only after the children grow up or our fertility journey ends, whether it was successful or not, and grieved, along with
mm,
our age and life experience, that we start to question our value and lives outside of these relationships and roles and what it is that we truly want from our lives. And I think we start to put those ideas, beliefs, goals, and boundaries in place at that point. And that sort of seems like it's late, right? Like a late bloomer.
mm,
So I suppose that's more broadly. The second one is what my own trauma and PTSD and abusive relationship with alcohol did is to completely delay what may otherwise have been a much easier and more organic growth into my own womanhood. I don't regret it because I've learned so many incredible things along the way, and that was my trajectory. But one of the things I noticed as a sober person was how different I was, and from that which I'd always believed that I was. It challenged so much about me. So I was, how old am I now? 48. So I was 40 when I gave up drinking. I thought I was an extrovert. I wasn't. I used to be the life of any party. Well, I thought I was. I was actually a toxic drunken train wreck, but I thought I was really extroverted. I had a lot of beliefs and self-beliefs that I'd formed as an adult that was a drinker, mostly negative, but had to challenge and work through when I stopped drinking to form a new sober adult identity. And I didn't know who or what I was and what I actually stood for. And that was really, really scary. A 40-year-old woman who's, had children, worked in a lot of roles, lived my life, and not knowing who you are feels absolutely terrifying. And it took a lot of work, a lot of healing, pain, and growth. And it was hard. It was really hard to go through that and to face up to myself and develop an identity, so who I was, and we're never only one thing, right? We've got so many different things that change and shape us, and it's okay to be fluid. It's fine, and I'm still learning every day. But by a late bloomer, I guess I'm at a point in my life now where I really like myself. I can meet my eyes in the mirror, and I couldn't for so many years. I have really strong morals and values of my own. And I know what I stand for, and I know what's important to me. I know that I'm resilient. I know that I'm strong and I'm honest. I know that I'm valuable and valued. And that's just such a wonderful place to be. And part of me wishes that I'd been a lot younger when I started feeling that, and I might have made more of my youth and, those things. But then I think, well, I'm here at this place and this space now in my late 40s, and what a fortunate place to be, because some of us never get there. So I'm really grateful,
So true.
grateful for that. But for me, being a late bloomer means really coming into your own and stepping up to those challenges and forming that identity and being really confident and happy with where you are.
I guess Laura and I would probably describe that as our third act. And one of our guests we had on in season 1 described the third act as the act where everything comes together, and it's the best act of a play or a performance is the third act. And it sounds a lot like you're in that third act of your life where it's all coming together for you, and you can really be true to who you are. And those values were always there. They were always there for you. You just suppress them down and push them down with, as you say, with using alcohol and not really allowing the true Ali to come out. So
Yeah. I don't think I was disingenuous at any point. I just don't think I had any sense of who I was without alcohol. I had this whole identity attached to that, and this whole set of behaviours in this life, and it was all stripped away. And there were some things that remained, but I had to recalibrate and reshape those things, like my relationships with my children. That being absolutely the most important thing. And I've managed to do that. I have a great relationship with my children now, albeit remotely, because we live in different states, which is a different story. But they're just everything to me, and it's all wrapped up together. But yes, definitely a third act, and maybe there'll be a fourth and a fifth. Maybe it'll be a
let's
sixth.
hope so.
I don't know. Well, I do hope so. I do, but giving myself permission as well, just to experience and not expect, and just go on a journey without, over anticipating what's next, which I always did. I always, was, well, what's next? What am I going to do next? What about this? What about that? Whereas now I can just kind of, as trite as it sounds, go with the flow, and that's a really nice place to be.
And I suppose you don't have to wear the mask of other people's expectations, like you said before. Everyone thought you were the life of the party, or all of these things. A lot of that was a mask that you were wearing through use of alcohol, or not being able to accept who you were in those moments without something else, helping you along.
Absolutely. And I find now, and it's actually interesting, and I'm not complaining about it. I'm genuinely not. It's a very privileged position to be in, but because I've done so much work
Mm.
and have done so much healing, and because I am, I would like to say, reasonably balanced now, I attract a lot of negativity and toxicity to me almost because people know that I'm impartial and I'm, reasonably balanced. And I'm not going to buy into things. I'm not going to, buy into drama or toxicity. And people find that very appealing. And, I'm lucky to be able to sort of, I suppose offer advice and things, but it's a fine line between doing that and then setting your own boundaries as well and protecting yourself, because that's a whole other thing.
Absolutely.
As in people kind of perhaps going through their own trauma or toxic lives, coming to you for advice and things, or coming to you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Particularly, I mean, that's why the rise of the peer support worker in foster care, in addiction, in mental health
Mm.
is becoming more and more prevalent, because people with lived experience of these things actually can empathize and be
Mm.
almost more compassionate because they
Yeah.
understand. And I
Mm.
think that is a wonderful thing to be able to offer. But I also think that you've really got to set your boundaries around, how you manage that, and how protect your own mind and your own sense of self-preservation, because you can give too much of your way. Because with a lot
Mm.
of addicts, and a lot of people with people-pleasing syndrome, which I also had, you just want to throw yourself in and fix people and fix things and pick up the broken bird and mend its wing and be all
Mm.
things to all people. And I still have that pull. I still have that urge to do that. And the trick, I suppose, for me is, I always sort of mutter away to myself: sphere of influence, set boundaries, sphere of influence, set
Mm.
boundaries. So what can I affect and what can I offer without throwing myself on the table like a slab of meat and giving my everything, where I
Mm.
actually don't have and shouldn't be fixing a problem. People need to be empowered
Mm.
to heal and fix themselves. No one can do that for them.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting place to be.
Yeah. It
And
really is. You sound so wise. Mm.
Oh dear. Well, I wouldn't say well. I don't know. Thank you. That's a lovely compliment.
No, but just, I mean, I mean, and I mean it. I think that it's so true that yeah, you can't always fix other people, and they do genuinely need to sort out their own issues. But as someone so that you are so strong, I can and wise in your current state, it would be, I'm sure, very reassuring to many people that come into contact with you, through work or through peer support or friends, to have you in their lives, being that person, being that rock, and having that lived experience that would be so relatable to so many.
I think it demonstrates that you can get through it too. Like
Mm.
there is hope, there is light, there is a chance, there are options.
Mm.
It's nobody's a rock. It takes
No,
different
true.
things to move different people, but
Mm.
there are ways and means, and there is a way through.
Mm.
it's funny you say, fixing the broken bird. I've had this little magpie, sort of probably a juvenile, sort of not a fully grown magpie, but like not a tiny baby, visiting outside my office window the last week or so. And the first time that I saw them, they literally had a broken wing. Their feathers were
Oh.
hanging down, and I was really worried. And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And my son's partner works at a vet, and I was texting her, and I was thinking, "What am I going to do? Who can I get to come and fix this? Pick up this broken bird?" Because for total clarity and transparency, I am terrified of birds. So it was
Oh.
never going to be me that was going to be going out there and fixing this bird with this broken wing. I could see this bird. It was very upsetting for me. And then, bird flew off. And so I texted her back and went, "Oh, don't worry. Bird's flown off. obviously wings not broken, you know. Next day, bird came back, still broken wing. Anyway, been watching it, and bird was back this morning. Guess what? No broken wing. Like, didn't need an intervention from me. Just needed to have it itself and its time to heal. And I thought that was a really, like, for me, I was really quick. I wanted to jump in and I wanted to fix this poor broken bird, even though I was terrified and I wasn't going to be fixing the bird. But given its own time, it healed itself because it had the resilience and it had all the things that it needed within itself to heal. And sometimes I think, you know, if I look at that and I think about people, we are very quick to want to jump in to help to fix, especially if we're fixers and we're doers, but we can't necessarily always do that. So
no, and we're not building resilience either. We're not building self-efficacy. We're not building empowerment.
yeah,
We're building reliance, and that's not healthy. You can absolutely help people, I think. Like you said, if you jump in too quick and your own schemas, I'll use the word schemas, or your own needs are to be wanted, needed, be that person, then you can set up an unhealthy dependency. And you're absolutely right. Like, sometimes you just need to sit back and offer some advice, or do nothing and just wait and watch and see what happens. And you've summed that up beautifully, Kathy. That's exactly what you did and what you needed to do.
yeah. What changes would you like to see for women as you look ahead to the future? Like, is there anything, big or small that you could influence, or maybe as womenhood we need to, like, nothing small there, Ali?
I know. Well, that one's a very big question. I suppose to try and be eloquent, which is not easy for me because I'm very loquacious. I work in women's health, which I spoke to you about earlier, mostly in relation to emotional and psychological support. So domestic, family and sexual violence, casework, therapeutic and holistic self-supports. And whilst you take media with a grain of salt, of course, we're seeing that these issues are getting worse, not improving. Women are dying as a result of gendered violence at the rate of at least 1.5 women per week in Australia at the moment. And that I consider to be an absolute national emergency. Thousands upon thousands more women live in fear of their lives. They're fighting to protect their children. They're scared to go for a jog, for goodness sake. And it's just diabolical.
Awful.
It's a whole of society issue, and it requires a whole of society response. So people, rightly so, jump up and down, and this anger is good righteous anger, and good righteous anger fuels response, and it fuels change, which is needed. But we're all a part of this. We need more funding, more programs, including prevention, more education, and much tougher laws protecting women and throwing the book at perpetrators. It's very loose at the moment. There's lots of legislation around. It's firming up. The coercive control in New South Wales is firming up now. It's how do you demonstrate coercive control when it doesn't leave bruises? It's difficult. So we're working through these things. So we're still seeing a deeply misogynistic and patriarchal society. That's just a fact. So if I was looking for a change, I want a world where women have equity, safety, financial, housing, pay, career opportunities, everything. Change is occurring way too slowly in this space, and we need to keep pressure on the pace and hold our communities and our governments and our men responsible. We can be allies and we can, help the narrative along, but we can't be constantly defending ourselves. We need this, taken up and implemented by the people that can affect change. It's really, really critical.
Yeah, agree.
I guess as you're a mother to girls, Laura and I are both mothers to, well, I have a son and daughters. Laura's a mum to 2 sons. So as mothers to sons, we have, I see it, we have a responsibility to make sure that our sons understand and do differently, do better. And it's not to say that our husband's a bad man. That's not what we're saying at all. And we all know that it's not all men, and that's not what we're saying at all. But I do think that we as women who have sons have some responsibility in ensuring that there is significant change in how we raise our boys. That being said, it can't be all on us, and that is a very slow change as well. Like that's, decades before our sons are big people in the world when, so it is also on, beholden to the generation of men that we have with us now to also be part of that change. And not feel threatened, because we're not asking them to give anything up. We're actually just asking that we have the same safety that they have. And that's not necessarily they don't have to give something up for that. Most men don't actually have to give anything up because they're good men and they keep women safe, but they don't see that they necessarily need to be part of that conversation.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, Kath, that you opened up by saying that you're the mother of a boy, and that therefore you have a responsibility to make sure your son grows up respecting women. And I don't disagree in part at all. I think that's very much part of it. However, you've immediately taken that on yourself, that's your responsibility. And this is what we as women do. And this is what we need to challenge, that we are responsible, because we are the fixers. We are the right. Don't go jogging. Don't wear a short skirt. Don't let your son do this. It's up to us. We've got to fix it. I'm fucking sick of that. I'm sorry. And I mean that in the most respectful way possible. Like, I do agree, like, you have a role to play in that, but your son could go to any one of unnamed schools that are in the media at the moment that are constantly perpetuating
100%.
gendered, misogyny. And, we see these young boys in the paper, but he was such a nice young boy. What a fine young man he was. How could he have, stabbed somebody in toilets? He was lovely. He was an award winner. These protective mechanisms around, well, this must just be an anomaly, I just call bullshit on that. And I say, no, not all men are like that. Absolutely not. There are some wonderful men. I'm not saying all men, but what I am saying is that those wonderful men need to step up to those toxic men, and they need to take responsibility. We know what we need to do and we do it. The guys need to step up.
Yeah, I feel that the righteous anger is what you were talking about before, and how that is what is needed to make change. And I had this huge sort of argument with my teenage son and husband the other night, obviously after the terrible incident at Westfield Bondi, and we were talking about the fact that misogyny and extreme misogyny is an ideology, and it is the responsibility of society, like you just said, Ellie, to think about it on a much grander scale. Like, what can we do? This is no longer just women are sick of it. We're fucking sick of it and so angry and we're so tired, and we just need it to be taken as seriously as terrorism attack. This is not just a bad man with mental health issues. I'm sorry, it's not. And it never is. It's this huge, like you say, where is this? There is a problem with sexism, misogyny.
Of course there is, and in my line of work, I see, not unlike my alcoholism, band-aiding a problem that shouldn't actually be there. Like, it's not fair. We, the government throws or provides, and rightly so, money towards remediation and rehabilitation and domestic violence workers and case workers and all of these things, and millions of dollars go into that, whereas if we could work out a way to put that money towards re-education and prevention. I've had many arguments on this, whether or not that's possible, and I won't go into it here, but you look at how much money goes into fixing or for women, this trauma recovery centre. Don't get me wrong, 25 million over 5 years, amazing, so happy we can make such a change. But why should we fucking have to? Could we put
Yeah.
that 25 million into something else so these women weren't traumatized? You know?
Yeah.
It's huge, isn't it? So it's just a
Yes.
lot of levels to the problem. We need government, we need education, you still need the trauma recovery centres and the places that women can go to feel safe. We need those places. But yeah, there has to be a broader look across where is this gendered hatred and violence coming from and how do we stop it? And it is as simple as like saying to the good men in our lives, like, and this is what I had a big argument about, if you have to call out bad behavior from your friends, from other men. If other men are saying something that's like, well, she shouldn't be wearing a short skirt or whatever it was, that kind of sort of dismissive comment where it puts the blame on the woman for whatever, that's where you need to step in and say, no, that's not acceptable. That kind of, it has to be, the men have to help us out here. We cannot.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's just my little bitty change that I'd like to see for
yes,
women.
we've gone on a tangent there.
Just a really small change.
Just a small
tiny
change.
Tiny change.
True equality for all and safety for women. Yeah, great. Let's hope that can happen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, that's right.
We've had such a great chat with you, but we do want to end on one last question, which we ask every guest, and that's regardless of their age. But we want to know, being that our podcast is called The Change after all, what are your feelings towards the change, and be that perimenopause or the menopause? Where are you at with it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm 48 years old and I'm in the grip of perimenopause well and truly, which is lovely. What I love is that, thanks in no small part to women like you and the women I work with, other amazing female clinicians, doctors, health practitioners, podcasters, influencers, we have such better awareness these days of what perimenopause and menopause actually is and means and how it affects women. I hadn't even heard of perimenopause until 6 years ago when I had a hysterectomy, only menopause. I grew up hearing about menopause, but not perimenopause. And with that public knowledge, that education, that advocacy comes awareness. And with that awareness comes choice for us, right?
Yeah.
I take a really good supplement. I make sure I eat really well and certain types of food. Now, not a diet. I don't, I eat kind of reasonably what I want when I want. But I do make choices to minimize the symptoms of the perimenopause. And I continue to go about my day largely unaffected, to be honest. I'm very fortunate. Even 15 years ago, I would have probably been shunted onto HRT and basically told to suck it up and that everyone goes through it and it's not a big deal like my mum was and my grandmother. I'm really grateful to live in a time where I can easily access that information, where I know that I'm not going crazy. Thanks again, men, and where awareness and support grows day by day. So it's well known. It's becoming increasingly well known. So we're really educated these days, which is excellent. And luckily, the Golden Girls has taught me that menopause isn't the end of my life as a healthy, vibrant, vital woman, and that there is life after menopause.
Love that you loop that back to the Golden Girls so beautifully. Look,
beautiful closure, hey? I know, complete that cycle.
Yeah, it was just the perfect way to end. Ali Anderson, thank you so much for joining us on The Change.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Wow. Well, what a chat. Full confession, I used to work with Ali for a short period of time in emergency services, and I knew she was a powerhouse, but goodness me, that, certainly has left me with a whole lot of things to think about. And, her sobriety journey, while mine is slightly different, I certainly can look back and I know that I used alcohol to Band-Aid my feelings, Band-Aid my life, Band-Aid a lot of things. And there's no way that anyone who looked at me from the outside in would ever have said that I was an alcoholic. They probably wouldn't have even said that I had a problem with drinking. I mean, potentially in my 20s, late teens, early 20s, maybe they might have, said, oh, maybe she could drink a little bit less.
Yeah.
But that would be through the lens of that I would have been putting myself in really risky situations. And then it would have been that victim blaming around, well, you were drunk, or you shouldn't have done, or, the alcohol made you. Whereas, Ali, she stopped drinking in the last 8 years. And as she said, you don't give up until you're ready to give up. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know whether it was asking a little too much information to sort of ask her to explain more about how she was living with alcohol, because I think it's something that people keep quite secretive. And I think a lot of the time we don't have those conversations as often or openly as we should. And I think it was really, I'm really grateful to her for being so honest about the sorts of levels of her drinking and the deception and the things that she did. Like she was so honest with us. And I think that is so, about the driving and with your kids, and my God, so amazing that she's come to this place now where she is, as she says, a late bloomer, and she's got through it. And, gosh, it's massive deal. And I think while many of us don't have the same perhaps relationship to alcohol, I think she was very brave in bringing that to us. I think many of us will relate to the sense of being late bloomers and having got, in your 40s and 50s is for many women a time of, as we talk about, the third act. And it's a time of kind of a rebirth where we go through some shit in our youth, and then we come out the other side and go, okay, here I am.
What do I want for me?
Yeah. What's next? Well, who am I? And all this. It's a real time, and it's such an interesting time. And just that's why I just love doing this, Kathy, because you just have these engaging conversations with women who have been through some shitty times, and you go, wow, yeah, that was amazing chat, and she was really great.
Yeah.
And the other piece I just wanted to bring up, aside from her story and journey with alcohol, was obviously her work in the women's health space is so incredible. What she does down at the health centre in Illawarra, and listening to her talk about what needs to be done for women in the future was really powerful. I think it makes me angry just sitting here and listening to another woman who's so smart, and she's in that space. She knows the women are being affected, so she's on the front line basically. And you can live in a little bubble, can't you, and think, oh, everything's fine, and then horrific events happen that make the news, whereas she's living it every day. She knows it's shitty out there for women, and she's working towards making it better, but that there needs to be big changes, and there absolutely does. And I think that we can talk about it till the cows come home, but we need some change. We need the men to get involved, and I think it's just a really great discussion to have.
And I think it is easy for those of us who are very fortunate to live in a bubble of good men to think, well, what can be done, or how, how does this change, need to happen, or why does it need to happen? Because we're surrounded by good men. But Ali sees the other side of that. And yes, it's a small percentage of men, but unfortunately, it is gendered violence against women, and it needs to change.
It really does.
Our good men need to be part of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And hopefully they are.
Yeah, that's right. Going forward, that's it. And she was so great. And I love the cycle back to the Golden Girls, and that's that's a lovely little reference, and how we just need more representation of women in the world generally. And I think just women in positions of power, but on TV, in our faces, much more, talking about the things that matter to women, will be helpful for the world in general.
Absolutely.
Down with the patriarchy. But yeah, that was really good chat with Ali. So great to have her on.
Thanks for listening to The Change, a fully independent podcast.
We love the Australian-made, all-natural skincare brand Alivio Wellness, and we know you will too.
Use code THECHANGE at the checkout to receive 20% off your next order. Whether you're seeking inspiration, curious about change, or just here for the great banter, we'd love you to make The Change your new go-to podcast.
And even better, send us your voice notes or questions about change. We'll use them on the show. Email us at changepod2023@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at @the_change_pod. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more on the change.